Awesome. Well, hey everybody. I've got Colby Gilmore here from Ron Blue. He's a good friend of mine. We met a couple years ago at Barnabas Group, I think it was, if that's correct. And we have a lot in common, and both like to see an increase in people's understanding their personal finances a little better, and even more so as it comes to biblical finances. So we've both led Financial Peace University classes, and Colby's over at Ron Blue, and they're doing some really great stuff. So Colby, I'll kick it over to you, and if you'd like to tell us just a little bit more about yourself and Ron Blue, would be great.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andrew. It's always good to talk with you and catch up. We both hit it off in Barnabas Group just through this idea of how passionate we were about financial stewardship. So that's what I get to do for my job. It's kind of the perfect intersection of my purpose, passion, and then now in my profession of just helping people make wise financial decisions so they can live generously. Basically, just to apply biblical wisdom. The Bible has over 2,300 verses on how to handle money and possessions. So I think it's a pretty good time-tested textbook for how to make wise decisions. So that's what I get to do at Ronald Blue Trust. Our mission has been from day one, which is 1979, to help Christians free up resources so they can assist in fulfilling the Great Commission. It's no different today. So that's what I get to do. And when I was talking to Andrew recently, we were talking about this tool that I've used recently. It's from our friends at the Ron Blue Institute. It's called the 4 H's of Financial Wisdom. And I thought it's a great one-pager. I mean, it's a front and back pager of just kind of some wisdom to apply to your finances. So.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I think we're going to walk through that with you here in a minute. Is that one pager something we can make available for people, or are we able to hand that out? Okay.
Yeah,
awesome.
We can hand that out. So I mean, whatever way you want to take care of that, or you can go to the Ron Blue Institute website and download a copy there. It's a great resource on the Ron Blue Institute. There's a lot of great short podcast videos just to provide different guidance and wisdom, all from a biblical perspective.
Awesome. Well, I'll have that link down below, so if you want to pause the video and download that, Colby's going to walk us through this in just a second here. So I'll give you a second to do that, and now Colby, I'll turn it back over to you, and if you want to kind of take us through, it's the 4 H's, correct?
Love to, yeah. So kind of the best way to utilize this one pager is really there's a front side that has kind of the questions to ask from the verses and principles, and then the back side is more of an assessment. How are you? Like, where do you feel on your stewardship journey? What are your percentages around your financial health of where you're using your spending your money? Or where's your hope for the future? How have you developed your habits? So before going into that, I would say look at it, look at the backside, fill it in yourself, so you actually can take a kind of a snapshot or a physical of how you are currently, how you feel about your finances, how you feel about the future. And then let's go to the front side, and this is what I'm going to walk you through now. And maybe by walking through and asking these questions, you could retake the test and actually maybe move up a couple of points now that you've actually kind of taken, asked yourself maybe the right questions. So to start it off, it really comes down to, when it comes down to financial wisdom, it's not, tips and tricks of how to best make, financial decisions. It really comes down to your heart, right? When you have your true convictions, then it turns into behavior or into beliefs, and then eventually leads to our behaviors, right? So we have to really believe what is something that's a conviction of ours, something that I really believe is true, and it follows into my belief system, and it follows into my behaviors. I had Biola, a psychology professor, that he would call it your AB equals your AB. If your assumptions and your and beliefs, they'll lead into your actions and behaviors. However, if your actions and behaviors aren't reflective of your assumptions and beliefs, then maybe you don't actually believe what you think you do. So when it comes to our finances, it's no different. We have to ask these things of where is our heart? And that you'll see in the heart here is there's the idea of stewardship. Really, the first question anyone has to ask is, who owns it, right? do I really believe that God owns it all? That's the starting point, right? Psalm 24:1 says that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, right? That the Lord owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, right? So it's all his. It all comes from his hand, which I actually take personally as a great relief. I don't want to say, oh, this is all mine. That's a lot of risk. That's a lot of responsibility. But when I recognize, okay, wait, God's the owner, then that makes me a manager, right? I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs that they were the owners, right? Then I saw, or I even acted in a capacity as a manager, right? I was here to help care for the business, which I kind of liked. I didn't have all that risk and responsibility, but I got to participate in it. I was allowed opportunity, and that's what God allows us. That's why he provides us with wealth or income of any sort and blesses us, and he gives us some clear instructions on how to handle it. But it starts with the stewardship idea, right? But then it comes into, okay, well, now I understand that God owns it all. If I truly understand that, right, and hold everything with an open hand, then every spending decision is a spiritual decision, right? That's even, when you go to the mall, all of a sudden it's like, well, we can't go to the mall nowadays, but you go, well, what decisions am I going to make that are spiritual, right? If we really think that God owns it all, then there's nothing more or less spiritual than giving a tithe or going on a vacation, right? It's all God's in the first place. So when we recognize that, right, now we know, okay, every decision I'm making is spiritual. Then I can't fake stewardship, right? That comes down to, if you look at, you show me your tax return, I can tell you, where your heart is, right? Based on just your spending or your giving. Or if you're just trying to get a tax deduction, right? So we can't fake stewardship. You look at your pocketbook or your bank account or your calendar, right? Where is your priorities? Another aspect of the heart is really contentment, and that's a key when it comes to money. Is often we make bad decisions because we lack contentment, right? That Paul says in Philippians that I've learned to be content in any circumstances with very much or very little, right? That's the key in finance. If we can just be content with what we have and what God's blessed us with. But then what about our faith? Do we actually, do we have faith in God, right? Do we actually believe what he says? In Hebrews 11:1, it says that now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen, right? We can't see it, right? How do we get that? But we have this hope, right? That's where faith comes in. So if we have that faith, then we can journey in this stewardship journey and find contentment as well. But then there's also the wisdom, right? I love James. My church just went through James, and just the wisdom around it of James 1:5. I call it James 1:5 moments. When I have someone asks me a question, I go, I don't know the answer to that, but right, if anyone lacks wisdom, ask the Lord who gives generously, right? And he does, and look through Proverbs. There's so much wisdom there.
Yeah. It's as easy as just asking for it.
You just have to ask for it, exactly. So that's kind of the heart, right? Is understanding who owns it all. Do I believe that I have enough and I'm content with it? Do I believe that I demonstrate my faith through my finances, right? Those spending decisions are spiritual decisions. And then do I believe that God's wisdom is true and valuable? I personally just think that, the Bible's an old book, right? And the principles in it are still true today, right? The biblical principles transcend time. They transcend economy. They transcend geography, right? We could go to the Bible and it never changes. We can go to financial gurus and they change every generation. They could change daily. So we just know that they're unwavering. But once we ask these things for the heart, then we move to the next, which would be the bottom quadrant of the 4 H's is our habits, right? Now we know we have our heart. So how do we move into our habits? And it comes down to really one key financial piece, and that's spend less than you earn, right? Really, if we don't know how to spend less than we earn, you can't do anything else, right? You can't give generously. If you're not spending less than you earn, then you're going to go into debt. You're not going to be able to accomplish long-term goals, and you won't have any savings, right? So that's a starting piece. It's the key to financial contentment to financial success or financial independence is spending less than you earn. Proverbs 13:11 says, dishonest money dwindles away, but he that gathers little by little makes it grow, right? You don't have to save a ton, but you do little by little. Moves into, I think, after that being really important is setting long-term written financial goals, right? That's in Amos, I think it's Amos 3:3, it says, how do two people know where to go if they haven't first asked the question, right? I like Alice in Wonderland, and in it, Alice comes upon two paths, and she doesn't know where to go. And the Cheshire Cat, asks, "Where are you going?" She goes, "I don't know." And he says, "Well, then either path can take you there, right?" So we have to set long-term goals. We have to write them out. We got to make them realistic. I think that's where so many people will don't succeed in their finances is because they've never even put a goal down, or they put one out there in general, but they never really quantify it. It's got to be measurable, right? But it's a key point, like Ephesians 2:10, that we're God's workmanship, right? We're his masterpiece. That God wants us to do things. He's prepared us to do good works, to be generous, ready to share. So we got to actually quantify these goals and to achieve them.
Yeah, and that's a key thing, I think, what you mentioned there too, especially writing it down on paper, having it clear, set. And it's also something that you do that, both you and your spouse are aware of that, and there's not these two separate goals that either parties doesn't know about. So I think that's definitely key, of being on the same page there and having a common goal together, and can even bring you closer in your marriage as well too.
Yeah, that's a great point. That really, you have to have those marital goals, right, and sit and have unity with them. But I think it's a blessing. A marriage is a blessing, right? That you get a helper, you get someone that's here to help you with your goals, and that's I would agree with you there. Another part of our habits is avoiding the use of debt. This is probably one of the biggest problems people have in general nowadays, and it results from the fact that we can't spend less than we earn, right? Or it's kind of all American, right, to have debt. When I talk to people about debt, they'll often tell me they don't have any debt. And I'll go, "Oh, really? Well, so your house is paid off?" "Oh, well, no, I have a mortgage." "Oh, okay. Do you have a BMW? Did you buy that in cash?" "Oh, well, no, I have an auto loan." "Oh, okay. But I don't have any credit card debt." And it's like, "Oh, but the others are our debt. We just label them differently." But we have to recognize that debt is debt is dangerous. The Bible is pretty clear on it. It doesn't say debt's a sin, but the Bible never says debt's a good thing, right? It says in Proverbs 22:7, right, that the rich rule over the poor and the borrower is a slave to the lender. I think that's so true in times of like economic uncertainty. If you just went back to 2008, or even nowadays, if you're in debt, it really does feel like bondage, especially when you have someone coming after you, right, that they want to get paid, and you can be a slave to that. Psalms 37:21 says that the wicked borrow and do not repay, but the righteous give generously. I think that just is a great one to view your life, right? Are you paying back your debts? Or are you being generously? And that leads into the other piece of giving generously, right? 2 Corinthians 9:6-8 says that he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will reap bountifully. So what do you want to sow and what do you want to reap? God, a lot of the verses on generosity in the Bible are all for our purpose, right? Store up for yourself treasures in heaven. That God's giving us, he's giving us advice to help us, right? Sometimes it feels like, no, giving is this legalistic thing we have to do. God needs it. Well, he doesn't. God doesn't need your money. You can't outgive God. But he's giving you instructions. It's a better investment, really. If we looked at, I like how Randy Alcorn, he tells a story of, imagine that you're living in the Civil War time and you're on the Confederate side, but you know that the war is going to come to an end and the Union's going to win. So during this time, you've collected tons and tons of Confederate dollars. Well, what are you going to do then if you know the Union's going to take over and then the Union currency is going to be the only currency, right? Well, you'd be smart. You'd only keep enough Confederate dollars to keep you around for the next couple of weeks and be fed until that time period. You wouldn't store it all up and hoard it because it's going to be worthless in the end, right? It's the same thing with our money. It's the same thing that we're all going to die one day. You can't beat that, and you can't take anything with you when you die, right? There's no U-Hauls following hearse, but you can send it on ahead, and that's it's just good investment advice, right? When we talk to clients about investing, you try to talk about long-term horizons, right? Think with the long term. Think 20, 40, 60 years. Well, what if we think with eternity in mind, right? that we can store it up in heaven, and it's going to compound for years and years in God's economy, and we don't even know how that compounds. It says that Jesus says that it will grow at 100-fold, right? So
that's way better than you can
amount.
get from the S&P 500. So it's a good investment right there. And that's a great point as well too. And I love the Andy Stanley quote where he says the value of a life at the end of the life is always measured by how much of it is given away. And I think that's really true. And yeah, I mean we're not taking any of it with us. So how can we best steward it like you were mentioning earlier, with us being managers of his money.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Or as the martyr Jim Elliot, his quote is, right, he is no fool that gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. Now, he wasn't talking about money, but it's the same thing, right, with our lives. Now, the last piece on our habits is planning for financial margin. What does that mean? Well, margin's savings, right? It's actually having a positive something left over after all your other spending decisions, right? And you have to plan for that. If you don't plan for it, you'll never have any savings. But having margin allows you to accomplish those long-term goals. It allows you to maybe give more generously. It allows you to pay down debt that you have, right? So you have to plan for that. Proverbs 27:23 says, pay attention to your herds and know well the conditions of your flock, and pay attention to your herds, right? I kind of call it the accountant's verse, right? It's just keeping track of everything, but that's what we're doing as managers. We just got to keep track of it. That's why we create a budget. Any questions on that, Andrew, or anything you want to add in?
Yeah, well, I think with the habits section, well, actually, maybe we go through all these and then we can kind of come back and hit some of these, because I've been kind of taking some notes here, have a couple questions, and maybe we can go a little more in depth into some of these. So maybe let's run through them, and we'll dive in a little deeper afterwards if that works for you.
Sounds great. Yeah, so then we'll just move now to your health. We got our heart, we know some good habits, but what's our actual financial health, right? If we're going to a doctor and getting a physical to see how we're doing, right, this is your physical. Now, as you're filling it out, this might be the first time you ever looked at what is the percentage that I'm using on my living. I guess there's a kind of a funny word way to remember this. We call it the live, give, owe, grow. These are your 5 uses of money. And you might say, hey, Colby, there's a lot more ways I can spend. Well, yeah, but they really group into 5 key areas, right? You can use it on your lifestyle or your living. You can give it. You got to pay your taxes. You got to pay your debts. And then whatever's left is growing, right? So now as you sit down and look through this is the first time you can take a snapshot and really go, wow, that's my percentages. A key area is understanding, which I'm a CPA, so understanding your taxes, right? No one ever knows their effective tax rate and what their percentage is going to taxes, but it's a great exercise because often we view taxes as the greatest evil under the earth or under the sun, and yet the Bible tells us that we're supposed to pay our taxes, right? I would even say we should joyously pay our taxes because it's a symptom of our income. The fact that we've been blessed with income, that's why we get taxed, but it's a blessing, right? Especially when you live in a country
to pay them.
Yeah, opportunity to pay them. Especially in a country that allows a lot of benefits, right? I mean, we might disagree with how establishments spend our taxes, but we still have a lot of, great resources out there for us. But, that's a great thing that you can say, whoa, okay, 20% of my income is going to taxes. Okay, well, maybe I can better plan my taxes next year because I know kind of a rough percentage. Same thing with your debt. You could start realizing, wow, I'm really underwater because a huge amount of my spending is going to this debt payments. Maybe I want to actually make this zero. And that is the goal, right? The goal is to get that debt to zero. You can't get your taxes to zero. You could, but then you'd have to give me all your money and write it off as a debt, and I'll be happy and you'll be happy. And then, looking at your lifestyle and your giving, right? Maybe your giving percentage is a lot lower than you thought it was. Maybe you want it to be higher. Now, maybe you're not giving at all. I'm not going to tell you, hey, you got to go give 10% right now, right? Well, the Old Testament had that commandment, but we're not under, the law. We're under grace now. But I think it's a good, the training wheels to generosity is starting with a 10%. But if you can't get there, start at 2% and jump it up, right? Have a commitment to get to where you want to get. Maybe even set some God-sized goals of, one day I want to give away $1 million or I want to give away 50% of my income. You might not be able to do that now. but you can put that out there and start trying to achieve it. And then as you look at your living and you're growing, right? If you're living, I can't give you a general percentage on what you should have for your lifestyle. That's what you get to determine, and God allows that, right? But I will say this, the higher your percentage for your living, it's going to have a major effect on the rest. If you have a really high living percentage, you're going to have to make more income, right? And when you make more income, it doesn't have a direct effect on having, of increasing your grow bucket, because as you make more income, it's going to increase your tax bucket. So you have to think with after tax. So you got to prioritize that, and you got to prioritize having growth, right? That actually you save something that you have deferred gratification for the future, right? On the page it shows that like in the living section, you need to practice provision, contentment, and enjoyment, because money's a tool, right? Money's a tool, a test, and a testimony. It's a tool because it's how we live in our society. It's how we buy our food. It's how we pay our rent. It's also a test of how are you going to actually handle this if it's is a spiritual decision. And it's also a testimony, right? What if people are just walking around you every day and watching how you are spending, right? You might spend it a little differently because you want to leave a better testimony. You even have great stories of philanthropists that may be believers or non-believers that have left major testimonies of generosity. If it was like think about a Rockefeller or J. Paul Getty, where they have these great monuments to them. There's a testimony, even though maybe their family dynamics didn't work out the same because of great wealth. But as you look at giving, right, it's opening up my hands to release God's resources. And he wants my heart connected to his kingdom story, right? When you give, it breaks the power of money. That's the best thing it can do for you. And what else would I say here? I think I've addressed the rest. And then moving from health to hope, this is tomorrow's promise, right? If you change your habits, right? If you understand your convictions and you have your heart in the right place and you've developed good habits and you're actually starting to track stuff now because you figured out your health, well, then it can lead to hope for tomorrow, right? You can have increased margin because now you're prioritizing spending less than you make, and then you can accomplish your long-term goals. And this margin or hope barometer here, it starts with struggling all the way to surplus, right? Struggling meaning I can't even make it. Maybe I'm in poverty, or I lost my job. I can't go to work. It's not essential. Or the surviving. I'm just living paycheck to paycheck. Maybe I'm stable. Yeah, I've saved some. I have emergency fund. Or you really want to get to that other side where it's secure. Like I have savings for my long-term goals. I actually have a surplus and more than enough. But I would say it's not entirely all money driven. That there's actually a perspective to it as well. That you could have great wealth and you never feel above the stable. You might even still feel like you're surviving, right? Or you could have very little and you could actually say, actually, I have more than enough, right? And so remember that it's all it comes down to your perspective, that you could have hope for tomorrow just because you go, God, I am rich, right? The fact that where I live, even though I don't have a house, I don't have huge retirement accounts, but I have more than I need because, I prioritize my living expenses. I can give and meet the needs of others.
So it sounds like...
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was just saying, so it sounds like contentment kind of plays a piece into that level as well, too, of where you're falling on that, as well as probably some of the money aspects you're speaking about as well, too. That's cool.
Yeah, if we lack contentment, that's why we, our society loves to spend and buy more and more, right? It's materialism, and materialism is a result of a lack of contentment and a lack of what God's provided you with, right? I said earlier, right, the debt's not a sin, but it could be a reflection of a sinful, some kind of sin, right? That maybe the fact that you're so in debt is because you're not content and you're overspending. And that's often what it comes down to, keeping up with the Joneses. Yeah,
definitely. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you walking through those, and I think that's going to be really helpful for anyone who's kind of following along and going through this with us. I just want to jump back to a couple of the ones we were talking about and kind of ask some questions that may be on people's minds and get your thoughts on them. So looking at heart, so we have those kind of different beliefs in there. Do you find with just from your experience with the clients you've worked with and things like that people tend to gravitate towards one belief over the other, or kind of be kind of heavier on one, or and what have you kind of seen there?
Yeah, it's definitely it comes down to, right, we have so much knowledge in the world, right? We live in this information age, but it's understanding where do we get our knowledge from, and where do we get our wisdom, right? Because wisdom's the application of knowledge, right? We can look out there and take all these financial tricks and read all the financial books, but if we don't have wisdom to apply it, right? I think that's why we have so many arguments today about things. We all can find the knowledge to support what we believe, but we don't have wisdom to actually apply it. So where are we going to find our wisdom? And that's going to the Word of God, right? We can get wisdom from the Word of God, right, the Bible, or we can get it from the world. Often I find that we all, even believers, we're taking from our heart perspective on money, we're taking all the world's advice on it, and we don't look to the book that has most of the answers, or probably every answer you could ask for how to handle your money. So that's what I see. Is we develop these bad habits and bad beliefs because we're not going to the right source. So that's what I'd say. And then, looking at that heart, it's awesome. That would be, the faith component, right? Of we're not believing what, the principles the Bible has around money, but then that lack of contentment. I see that, too often, and I work mostly with believers. There's just this lack of contentment in finances. I want more money. I want to retire sooner. I need this bigger house. I need this vacation house. It doesn't end, and it could if we just kind of were content with food and shelter.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that's helpful, and that kind of answers my next question too. I was going to ask, what are some ways if you maybe aren't strong in some of those to grow in those areas, and I think that is a perfect solution to is just going to the source of all of that.
Yeah, I brought some let's see if we can. No, that's not going to work.
There it is.
That's my background. You got the Bible, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of great resources out there. I love reading books, but Randy Alcorn's The Treasure Principle. This is a great one on understanding stewardship, and it's an easy read. Anyone that Colby, I can't read very fast. I can't read very fast, but you can finish this pretty quickly.
Yeah, you gave me that one a few years ago, I think. So I got that on the bookshelf as well too.
All right. Did you finish it?
I did. Yeah, it was good. It's not the longest book, so it's a good one.
Longest, yeah.
It's an airplane ride. You can go through that one now.
Exactly. And there's a lot of other great resources out there to help you on this journey. If you look at any books from Ron Blue, or you go through a Financial Peace course, or Dave Ramsey, or even Russ Crossan's book, there's just tons. There's tons of pastors out there who've written these things. Just seek it and learn, and I think you'll love it.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, kind of going down the list here, looking at habits, which one of these do you feel people kind of struggle with most, and why do you think that is, and maybe what are some of the kind of solutions to combat some of that?
Yeah, it's spending less than you earn. That's probably the biggest one I see, which leads into avoiding the use of debt. It's just our society, right? We live paycheck to paycheck, which means we're, for the most part, we're spending more than we earn. Debt is always causing debt, though. It's not just an economic issue or an economical issue, right? Because you're in debt and you can't, you're in this bondage. It's also, it's a spiritual and a psychological bondage as well. That when you're in debt, it can cause great emotional strife, right? You start going, wow, I don't feel good, which it's been proven, right? It actually can harm your blood pressure, and it can cause you to get sick. It can cause marital conflicts. There's so many marriages that end in divorce, and money fights and money issues is an underlying concern. And often I would say
the number one
underlying
cause
of that, and one of the underlying key reasons is debt. And I just think that, well, if maybe we were all debt free, our marriages would survive a lot better. I think Ron Blue has this funny quote that he goes, what if when the second coming happens, God only takes those that are debt free, right? He may have already came. So I think that as for the habits, that's where I would go to. There's still goals. I think a lot of us don't put realistic goals down. I mentioned that earlier. And that's an area I admit that people miss. And the one thing is it's looking at the right order of operations. Is the world, or most of us, we start with, okay, I made some money, I'm going to use it for my lifestyle, right? YOLO, you only live once, so let's live it up. Oh man, I overspent, so I had to take out some debt. Right now I'm building up my debt bucket. I really hope that I took enough withholdings from my taxes so that, come tax season, I get a refund and don't have to borrow to pay my taxes. I've seen that. People that make great money and they have to take out a line of credit to pay their taxes because they haven't planned for that. Well, okay, now since I don't have any money, I can't save and I can't give. But if we prioritize and do the other way, where we start with, what if I give first? I'll pay my taxes because I know my percentage and I have to. If you don't pay your taxes, you'll go to jail. I'm paying off my debts. I'm making that a priority. And those are the first three things, right? I've got my giving, I got my taxes, I got my debt payments. And you could throw in, now I'm going to save a little bit. And now whatever is left, use for your living expenses, right? That's the easiest way to create a budget. If you just take income, subtract those other three buckets, or maybe even put in what you want to save, now you know exactly what your ceiling is for your lifestyle.
Yeah, I like that. Well, jumping up to the health section, and you kind of touched on this a little bit. I know there's not going to be the same percentages for each person. Everyone's going to be a little different, but do you have general kind of targeted percentages? I mean, obviously debt, we would want to get to zero as fast as possible if it's not there already. But are there kind of any that you see are ideal for most people? I know it's not going to be everybody.
Yeah, I guess it's a good question. I like algebra. So if we did algebra and kind of backed into it, right, I'd say, okay, well, for a giving percentage, let's be at least trying to get to 10% or higher. I think 10% is just meeting the mark, right? You can give more than that. Now that's up to each person, and we need to do it cheerfully, right? So there's a percentage figure. Taxes, that's going to be a symptom of your income, so I can't give you a general percentage. For most, when you add in Social Security, federal and state, it's probably around 20% for the average person. But you can't necessarily get to that. But debt, right? Like you said, get that to zero, right? That's the only bucket you can get rid of, and you want to get rid of it, right? It's a lot of freedom to being debt free. Set a percentage for growing. For savings, I say typically try to do 10%. You can do 15% wherever you're at. One thing is it's a great thing to save, but don't save so much that you miss out on what you can do in life, right? Like God, it's in the book. What's the book called now? God and Money, that came out recently. They do the authors take a new take on the rich fool, right? And the rich story of the rich fool is he's building a bigger barn to store all of his stuff, right? And then God says, I'm going to take it all from you today. Your life's over. So they adapted it to a modern perspective, and it's I'll paraphrase it, but basically saying, look at me, I have fully funded retirement accounts. I have all this extra margin. So I'm building a new passive income sources. I have some rental properties, I have all this great wealth, right? And yet that's the same story of the rich fool, right? He had barns. We now have retirement accounts and some investment properties, right? Don't just penny pinch everything and miss out on the joys, right? There's you have financial capital, right? That's what you build your wealth by spending less than you earn. But financial capital is only one part of the house, right? If you build your house on financial capital, it will collapse. But when you build it on spiritual and social capital, it will survive. And spiritual capital is investing, right? In that's in giving, but that's in building. If it's paying for your kids to go on a missions trip. There's social capital, and that's just how we interact in our communities in public, right? That's why you're hospitable and you have people over, and those are the true things that have lasting impact. So don't just think I need to store this big amount of money, which that's a key thing. You need to do that for the future, right? 1 Timothy 5:8 says those that don't provide for their household have denied the faith and are worse than an unbeliever, right? But also be able to say, well, okay, 10-15%, that's a good amount. Let's aim for that. And then let's allow some lifestyle, but be content in that. So then that's what, going back to the algebra, what I mentioned is if we start create our giving percentages, kind of figure out our tax percentage, get our debt to zero, and then determine our savings, well then whatever percentage is left, that's your living expense.
Okay. Yeah. So that's helpful too, because that kind of goes into my next question of kind of, okay, we're making our list here or our budget or whatever and prioritizing these. I like having giving at the top, and then I would think probably the next one would maybe be taxes, debt, and then what would you do with savings versus some of the livings? How would you kind of put that in that order?
Yeah.
Or do I have that order completely wrong? And I mean,
No, you nailed it. Right. Yeah. The first thing is, that's giving, right? Second thing is taxes, which, usually that comes out, right? That's withheld. But we got to do that. Third is that debt, get that debt knocked down. And then, what's next? Do I do savings or I do my lifestyle? And, it comes down to, if you're really the saver, let's put that savings first and then use your lifestyle. Now, maybe you go, well, no, I want to do, I mean, maybe I don't even have the capacity to save, right? So this is my lifestyle. So it's a balancing. I like to include the savings beforehand, which it's easy because for those of you that maybe have a retirement account and it's already directly being deposited, right, to your 401k or whatever it is. Well, then, now when you look at your lifestyle, you have to already go, okay, that savings piece is out, so I gotta reduce that for my living expenses. But it's really just knowing the first three, and then now you have opportunity for the fourth and fifth.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, taking care of your household and making sure the lights are on and things like that as well too. So, and the last one you talked about there was the hope section. You kind of had that diagram with the almost like a speedometer, it seems like. So I guess, I mean, in America, we have I think it's something like 8 out of 10 Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. So kind of looking at that speedometer, where would you say the average American kind of falls on that? And I know you said it also had to do some, not just with money, but kind of your view on some of those things.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a reason why the margin meter's stuck around the surviving or between surviving and stable. And that's most people. I think we even see it, unfortunately, right now, where we have people forced out of jobs and they really were living paycheck to paycheck and now they don't have a paycheck. So they're struggling. You instantly drop. I mean, it's really, when you have surplus, it's really hard to drop from there, right? But when you're in a surviving state, it's easy to drop to struggling the moment a paycheck stops. So I think that's most of us. There's probably a good amount of us that could easily be that stable position, but we haven't prioritized building a financial plan, so we're still surviving. And that's really at any income level, which is just the importance of having a financial plan. Finance might not be fun for you, but you got to have one, and it's going to drastically increase your peace of mind and give you more confidence and clarity. So to answer your question, I'd say that's between surviving and stable.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, because like you were saying, there probably are a good amount of individuals out there who may be in that stable or even a higher range, but because they don't have that peace with that, they might feel as if they're kind of lower on that thermometer there. So one of the things I think is really important and we'll typically have a lot of pastors and churches listening to these, but one of the things I think is important for the church as a whole, and I'm sure you agree with me, is just getting some of this information out there and helping to educate their congregations on biblical finance. What are some things that churches can do to help both their congregation and also their communities that they're in as well too? Because this is obviously something that everybody deals with, and a lot of people really struggle with based on some of the numbers we see.
It's really it's a time for the church to be the church, right? To do what it's designed to do, to care for people, to love our neighbors, to do good works. I would say the key thing for church leaders right now and there's some that are doing a great job at this, is minister to your congregation, to your community, is care for them, reach out, touch base, have consistency, right? I was listening to a psychologist that mentioned, right, this is a crisis, so we have to acknowledge it's scary, right? Acknowledge to your congregation, yes, this is scary. We can't control it, but then we can control some things, right? We can control what we believe and what our faith is, right? And that's where we can lean on, right? This is scary. There's uncertainty, but God's certain and God's steadfast. And then just to care for those out there. One thing I'd say is don't start begging. Don't start going, oh my gosh, tithes down, giving's down. We need you to step it up, right? I like to be generous, but if a ministry or a church was coming to me and doing that, I would kind of feel disrespected, right? This is a time of uncertainty, right? Why would I want you to come tell me you need to give more? So I wouldn't say that, but I'd say to lead and provide resources, right? This is a great handout. Just walk through it. If you don't know what to say, just go through the verses and ask the questions. So I think that's what the church can do right there. And for those that have greater abundance, is maybe this is such a time to use that, right? Maybe you've been sitting on these larger amounts of money, or maybe you still have a job during this time. Maybe step up your giving right now, right? And give more to if it's even just to your church or to a ministry or to your community, right? That you can also think of just being able to spend on some local businesses. And just be able to care with what you have, right? I've been recently talking a lot about the story of Joseph in the Old Testament, that Joseph he knew what the future was going to bring. God gave him that vision that you'll have 7 years of prosperity and 7 years of famine. And if we look at that today, right? If we look at the last decade or a little over the last decade, we had great prosperity, right? I'm not saying everyone actually handled it well where they saved it up, but many people were able to have great jobs. They had a thriving economy. If you invest in the market, there's huge growth. And huge growth that even if you were down right now, you're still probably up overall. So maybe it's for such a time as that you had this 10 years of great abundance for a time of this famine. And it might not last 7 years. It probably won't. Maybe it'll last 7 months, maybe 7 weeks, which we're maybe around that now. Is maybe it's for this. Now use it, right?
Yeah. And we were coming out of a time where it was almost hard to lose money in the market, just investing in anything. So it's definitely a change for sure. But also I think a time like you were saying too, hey, if you've been blessed with kind of that stable income and you have those resources, it's a great time to, if you're not quite at that 10% level yet, now's the perfect time to start doing that and really serving your church, who's serving the community and helping others.
Yeah, and not to get too deep into tax details, because I often do that, is, hey, under the CARES Act now, you can, if you weren't giving before, you can deduct $300 above the line now for giving. So there's encouragement. Exactly. If you weren't giving, at least give $300. If you are a bigger giver and you can itemize your deductions, you could give up to 100% of your adjusted gross income and write it off this year, right? So you could, you don't want to pay any taxes this year, give away 100% of your income. You have that ability for the first time.
And in some states like Arizona, you can give a $600 tax, and you get a tax credit for that for certain organizations. Awesome. So there's really no, if you're going to have to spend $600 somewhere, might as well do it with an organization that you like and that's doing some great things in the community. But yeah, well, I appreciate having you on for this, and we're definitely gonna do a part 2 and walk through kind of establishing a plan for uncertainty, which I would definitely say is a time a lot of us are in with some of the things going on now. So really looking forward to that. And what's the best way for people to kind of learn more about Ron Blue or get in touch with you if they want to?
Yeah, you can feel free to reach out to me if it's on LinkedIn, or my email's colby.gilmore@ronblue.com. You can go to ronblue.com to learn more about the organization. And there's a lot of great resources there, videos of encouragement, of instruction, tools, and blogs. So feel free to go to either of those. Awesome.
Well, everybody listening, I encourage you to check those out. And yeah, I can attest to that. There's definitely some great resources and some good tools there. So thanks, Colby, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Great to be here.